He used to kiss her thighs like they were scripture. Now he couldn't even look her in the eye. Selena once believed love could outlast cruelty. She wore his last name like it still meant something, even when his words turned sharp and his hands stopped reaching for her. But when he told her to kill their child, standing there with a beer in one hand and bitterness in the other, something inside her shattered. Not with a scream, but with a silence so deep, it split her life in two. And Callum? He didn't even flinch when she left. Not until 7 months later, when he saw her again. Glowing, round, and undeniably still carrying everything he thought he destroyed. Welcome, my family. If this story finds you tonight, wherever you are, I want you to know you're not alone. Some of us have loved too hard, stayed too long, and walked away with pieces we never got back. So tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Or simply say, I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. And if you believe stories like this help people heal, remember, or feel seen, then do one small thing. Subscribe, like, share this with someone who needs it. Let's begin. The house had grown too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, but the kind that hums like a warning. Camille stood in the kitchen, staring at the lemon tea she'd just finished stirring. 3 spoons of honey, just how Cameron liked it, steamed on the counter, untouched. Again, she didn't sigh. She didn't speak. She just waited. A habit now. The clock ticked past 7 a.m. Cameron had already left. No goodbye, no glance. The front door had clicked shut with the same indifference as every morning for the past 6 months. Camille walked back into the bedroom. The sheets on his side of the bed were cold and flat. She made it anyway. At the foot of the bed, she paused to fold his towel and place it where he liked it, over the radiator vent so it would be warm after his shower. But these days he didn't bother using it. He just grabbed a fresh one from the linen closet without looking. The silence stretched, thick and familiar. She moved about the house on autopilot, wiped counters that were already clean, straightened picture frames that hadn't moved, relit a candle just to smell something alive. But everything inside her felt blank. Dinner time came. She plated salmon with rosemary, his favorite. The food went untouched. The door didn't open. Instead, a text pinged. Cameron, working late. Don't wait up. She stared at the screen. No heart emoji. No explanation. She slid the plate into the fridge. That night, she lay in bed before he came home, eyes wide open, facing the wall. When he finally returned, the front door clicked softly. His footsteps were careful, quiet. He didn't speak. He didn't shower. He didn't touch her. He slid into bed and turned his back. Camille blinked in the dark. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't reach for him. Instead, she whispered, softly, into the pillow. What happened to us? 2 years ago, they stood barefoot on wet grass in the middle of a summer storm. No umbrellas, no fear, just laughter, arms flailing as they raced around the yard like kids. He'd pulled her close, their clothes soaked through, their hair dripping. He kissed her like she was the only thing that ever mattered. She remembered her words that night. If the world turns cold, promise we'll find our way back here. He tucked her hair behind her ear, looked straight into her eyes and said, I promise. In their first year, he'd leave notes in her shoes. You make rainy days feel like spring. Your smile should be in museums. Don't forget lunch, your husband would cry. She used to save them in a little wooden box. That box now sat untouched at the back of her closet. On their anniversary, he had made pancakes shaped like hearts. Burnt one, laughed about it. He kissed her forehead and whispered, I still can't believe I get to wake up next to you. But now, she woke up to cold sheets, to lukewarm silence, to meals that went uneaten, texts that barely said a thing, and a man who once saw the sun in her eyes, now barely noticing if she was in the room at all. And yet, she still laid his towel out, still made his tea, still looked toward the door at night. Not because she was waiting for him to return, but because she was waiting for him to return, the man he used to be. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when waking up beside Cameron felt like winning the lottery of love. Back then, their mornings were lazy and tangled. No alarms, no rush. Just bodies draped over each other and laughter muffled in pillows. Camille remembered their honeymoon in Tulum. The warm breeze through the balcony doors. The smell of sunscreen and sea salt still clinging to their skin. She was brushing her hair by the mirror when he came up behind her, kissed her shoulder and said, "You feel like home." That one line stuck in her like a lyric. She had smiled into the mirror, eyes glassy with joy. That was the man she fell in love with. On their third night in Tulum, they'd wandered down to the beach after dinner. He'd carried their sandals. She danced ahead of him, skirt billowing as the tide licked their feet. He caught her waist, spun her around. "What are you doing?" She laughed. "Trying to slow down time." Back in the States, their little apartment was cramped but full of light. Camille used to play music in the kitchen while making breakfast. He'd sneak up behind her and sway with her, arms wrapped around her waist. There was one morning he flipped pancakes and burned one. It was shaped like a broken heart. "Symbolic?" she teased. "Never," he grinned. "I'm keeping the burnt one. You get the perfect one." She remembered a road trip to Nashville they took on a whim. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped in hers. They stopped at a gas station, music blaring from the speakers overhead. No one else around. Suddenly, he pulled her into the parking lot and said, "Dance with me. There's no music out here. Then we'll make our own." She laughed. They danced anyway, right there under flickering lights and a setting sun. A couple of strangers clapped from the car wash nearby. They bowed like fools, laughing all the way back to the car. Now, in the present, Camille stood alone at the dining table. The candles had burned down to soft wax. The plates were untouched. She wore the black dress he once called his weakness. It was their anniversary. She hadn't gotten a card, not even a text. Just a buzz on her phone at 8:17 p.m. "Cameron, don't wait up." That was it. No flowers, no smile, no memory. She poured the wine back into the bottle, cleared the plates, blew out the candles, and as the smoke curled into the air, Camille whispered, "He doesn't remember. Not the first kiss in the storm. Not the pancakes. Not Tulum. Not Nashville. Not her. But she remembered everything. Every detail. Every promise. Every always." And now, even though the warmth had gone, Camille still stood in its echo, trying to gather enough pieces of their past to feel something like love again. But tonight, for the first time, she felt something else entirely. Empty. "You're always so needy." Camille didn't flinch. She just kept folding the laundry, her eyes fixed on the soft cotton of one of his gym shirts. She didn't ask for affection anymore. Didn't reach for his hand when they walked past each other in the hallway. But the words still stung, more than she'd admit. Cameron was behind her, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge, his tone colder than the air that spilled out with it. "Why can't you just relax, Camille? Why do you always want more?" She didn't answer. She had stopped answering weeks ago, because any reply would just feed the argument. The silence was starting to shape her, molding her into a version of herself that barely resembled the woman she once was. Soft, affectionate, always humming. Now she simply existed inside the tension, moving from task to task like a shadow. She still cooked for him, still put toothpaste on his brush, still folded his undershirts just the way he liked, tight, then stacked in a row. But Cameron, he had left her long before she ever packed a bag. The emotional cruelty didn't shout. It whispered. It whispered when he turned the TV louder while she talked, when he scrolled through his phone at dinner, when he laughed at someone else's text and locked the screen when she glanced, when he started showering twice a day, never at home. That Thursday afternoon, Camille was tidying the couch cushions when she saw it. A receipt, tucked into the side pocket of his work slacks. Dinner for two, at a restaurant they used to love. Their place, the one with the string lights and the little white napkins he used to fold into her lap with a wink. But what made her pause wasn't the location. It was the lipstick mark on the corner of the receipt. Smudged, wine-colored, She stared at it for a full minute before folding it in half and putting it back exactly where she found it. That night, she still made dinner. Roast chicken. His favorite. He walked in late, smelling like cologne she didn't recognize. Saturday. Ate in silence. She watched him chew, watched him scroll on his phone with his fork in the other hand. "How was your day?" she asked, voice light. He didn't look up. Same. Nothing more. She told herself this was just a phase. That he was stressed. That maybe, just maybe, if she stayed soft enough, quiet enough, loving enough, he'd come back. She was clinging to a ghost. A man who looked like Cameron but no longer reached for her hand, no longer asked about her day, no longer kissed her goodnight. Still, she hoped. Because love doesn't switch off like a light. Even when it's cold. A work trip, they said. 3 nights. Just the two of them. Camille stood on the balcony, facing the city lights in her satin slip. He came up behind her, arms around her waist. His hands warm. His breath slow against her neck. "Don't move," he whispered. He undressed her like she was poetry. Like every part of her deserved attention. That night, it wasn't just sex. It was a love letter without words. He kissed every scar. Held her after. Called her, "My forever peace." She believed him. That was the night she conceived. Camille stood in the bathroom now, staring at the unopened pregnancy test. Fingers trembling. She hadn't told him yet. Some part of her was afraid. Not of his volume, but of his silence. Of the way he'd look past her like she was part of the wall. She wasn't in denial anymore. She just needed to be sure. Sure of the life inside her. Sure that something still beat with hope. Camille sat on the edge of the bathtub, knees drawn up, test stick in her hand. The pink line darkened slowly, sure. Steady, undeniable. She was pregnant. Her first instinct wasn't joy. It was fear. Not because she didn't want it, but because of how he might react. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked older. Not tired, but worn. Like someone who had carried hope for too long and now held something even more fragile. She placed the test down on the counter, took a breath, and walked out to the kitchen. Cameron was sitting at the counter, scrolling through his phone with one hand, eating toast with the other. "Cam," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I took a test." That caught his attention. He glanced up, eyebrows raised. Not with excitement, but suspicion. "What kind of test?" "Pregnancy." There was silence. He blinked. Twice. Then slowly stood, set the toast down and grabbed his keys off the counter. "You need to get rid of it." Just like that. No questions. No pause. No, "How far along are you?" Or, "Are you okay?" Just those 5 words. As if she had told him she bought the wrong brand of cereal. Camille stood frozen. "What?" she asked, voice cracking. He didn't even stop walking toward the door. "I'm not ready to be a father. You knew that. I've said it before. I'm not doing this." She stepped forward, one hand on the edge of the counter to steady herself. "Cam, this is our child. Fix it." He said it like he was ordering a coffee. Then the door closed behind him. She stood in the empty kitchen for a long time. Her heart wasn't racing. It wasn't even breaking. It was quiet. Still, like something inside her had finally gone numb. She went to their bedroom, pulled out the small suitcase she used to take on weekend trips, folded clothes neatly, picked up the wooden box of old love notes and held it in her palm for a beat, then left it behind. There was no grand goodbye, no tearful scene, only decisions. She printed a bus ticket, stuffed her ID and some cash into her bag, deleted her location-sharing app, blocked his number. One final check before she zipped the suitcase closed. Then she walked out. As the bus pulled away from the city, Camille didn't cry. Not once. She stared out the window at the highway signs passing like chapters, one name after another. And she knew this was the last time she'd see that house, that door, that man. He had chosen himself. So now she would choose the life inside her. And that decision didn't come from anger. Came from something deeper, from love. But this time it wasn't for Cameron. It was for the tiny heartbeat she refused to erase. Camille waited until Cameron left for the gym, same as he did every Saturday at 6:45 a.m. sharp. His patterns were predictable now. Emotionally unpredictable, yes, but his routine? Rigid, reliable, cold. That made this easier. As soon as the garage door hummed shut, she locked the front door behind him, walked calmly back to the bedroom, and opened the closet. Her suitcase was already packed. Had been for days. 3 pairs of jeans. For loose dresses, basic toiletries, flat shoes, and in the smallest inner pocket, a folded sheet of paper. The bus ticket, one way, to Colorado Springs. She moved with the quiet of someone who had practiced this in her mind for weeks. No hesitation, no pause. She unplugged her phone, deleted all text threads with Cameron, cleared her location history, and signed out of every shared account. She left her wedding ring in a small glass bowl by the sink. She didn't look back at the house, didn't glance at the fridge where their engagement photo used to hang, before he took it down, didn't stop to straighten the living room pillows. She just walked out the front door with her bag in one hand, and her future in the other. The bus station was nearly empty when she arrived. The early morning sun hadn't broken through yet. The air was brisk, quiet. Camille found a corner bench and sat with her bag in her lap, one hand resting over her stomach. She wasn't even showing yet, but she could feel it. Some tiny signal of life that refused to be ignored. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it quickly. She wasn't going to fall apart. Not now. Not when she was finally choosing herself. And the baby. The ride to Colorado was long and silent. Every town they passed looked like a place she might have stopped and built a new life. But she wasn't looking for another escape. She was looking for someone who had always stood on guard for her. Her older sister, Harriet. Harriet stood at the bus station with her arms crossed, shoulders squared like she was ready for battle. When she spotted Camille stepping off the bus, she dropped everything and rushed forward. The moment Camille fell into her sister's arms, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Her knees buckled. Her sobs came quick and loud. "I didn't know where else to go," Camille choked out. "You're home now," Harriet whispered, holding her tighter. "You're safe, and he will never come near you again." That night, Harriet made her tea. No honey, just ginger and lemon. Camille sat on the couch wrapped in a thick blanket while Harriet hovered like a bodyguard. "He hit you?" Harriet asked. Camille shook her head. "No. It was never his hands." "Then what?" She looked down. His silence. His words. His eyes. Harriet's expression hardened. Sometimes bruises don't show up on skin. They show up in spirit. Camille nodded. She'd never heard it put that way before. But it was true. And she was done covering bruises. Harriet didn't waste time. The very next morning, she changed the locks on every door and window in the house. She even had a friend from work, retired military, install a second deadbolt and a chain that could only be locked from the inside. "Just in case," she said plainly, screwing in the final bolt. "Let him try me." Camille watched from the hallway, one hand resting on her belly. She hadn't said much all morning, still adjusting to the idea that someone was finally putting her safety above everything else. Harriet wasn't just her sister. She was a fortress. By the end of the week, Harriet had filed a legal order to prevent any contact from Cameron. She knew how these things worked, knew that silence didn't mean surrender. It meant preparation. "I've seen men like him," Harriet said one night as she handed Camille a folder. "They don't come back with fists. They come back with apologies, with gifts, with words that sound like redemption but smell like control." Inside the folder were new documents. Paperwork for Camille to change her last name. A new work ID. A doctor referral. "You don't owe him the chance to find you," Harriet said. Camille didn't argue. She signed everything. Camille got a part-time job at a small flower shop downtown. The owner, an older woman named Trudy, didn't ask many questions. She just smiled when Camille said she was starting over. The scent of fresh roses, eucalyptus, and peonies filled her lungs every morning. It was the first time in months she felt like she could breathe. She swept floors, arranged vases, Learned the language of flowers. Hydrangeas for gratitude. Sunflowers for strength. Baby's breath for innocence. Every bouquet felt like a little poem. Harriet would drive her to work and pick her up every day. Not because Camille couldn't do it herself, but because Harriet refused to give Cameron even one opening. "If I see his face in this city, he won't walk away smiling," she muttered one afternoon. Weeks passed. Camille's belly began to round. She caught herself rubbing it absent-mindedly while arranging tulips at the shop. Trudy noticed one day and smiled softly. "First." Camille nodded. "You're glowing, sweetheart." It was the first kind word she'd heard from a stranger in a long time. She almost cried. Then, one afternoon, Harriet got a tip. A mutual acquaintance back home, someone from Cameron's gym, had mentioned he was asking around about Colorado, asking if Camille had any family out west. The next morning, Harriet bought a motion sensor camera and installed it facing the front porch. Camille knew the look in her sister's eyes. She wasn't paranoid. She was ready. The knock came 3 days later. Camille froze. Harriet was already halfway to the door. She opened it slowly, and there he was, Cameron, tired, unshaven, standing on the porch like he had every right to be there. But Harriet didn't flinch. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "Is she here?" Cameron asked quietly. "You've got 3 seconds to leave my property," Harriet said. "And if you don't, I'll break your nose and call the cops." At the same time, "I just want to talk to her." "You had every chance to talk to her when she begged for your attention." Cameron sighed, eyes scanning the house behind her. Please. I didn't know." "Save it." Harriet pulled a folded paper from her back pocket and slapped it against his chest. "Restraining order. Signed and stamped. You're done here." He looked down at the paper. "I made a mistake." "No. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You made a decision. Now live with it." Then she stepped back inside and slammed the door. Camille was in the hallway, frozen, hands on her stomach. "Did he?" Harriet pulled her into a hug. "He won't come near you. Not while I'm breathing." Cameron stared at the empty side of the bed like it had stolen something from him. The house was quiet but not peaceful. It was hollow, unsettling. Camille had been gone for weeks, maybe months. Time was melting together. Her clothes? Gone. Her toothbrush? Gone. Her perfume that used to linger in the hallway? Faded. Her contact? Blocked. At first, he assumed she was bluffing, that she'd cool off and come back. She didn't. He started by checking the hospitals. Not because he was concerned, but because the silence had grown too loud. He called clinics, pretending to be her husband. "Just want to make sure she's okay," he'd say. Most gave him nothing. Others told him firmly, "We can't release that information." Next, he tried her job. The receptionist said Camille had quit. No forwarding details. He called a few of her friends. No one picked up. He even drove by her favorite coffee shop. Sat there for an hour. Nothing. He checked their shared bank statements. Nothing unusual. No new charges. No activity at all. She had vanished cleanly. One night, he opened her old laptop. She hadn't used it in months, but he was desperate. He scrolled through old photos, Tulum, Nashville, their tiny apartment. Camille smiling in every frame. Then he checked her browser history. Searches for one-way ticket to Colorado. Women's shelters in Colorado Springs. Can I change my name while pregnant? That was the moment it sank in. She had left for good, and she was still pregnant. Cameron started spiraling. He returned to the gym, asked around like nothing was wrong. "You seen Camille lately?" Blank stares. Shrugs. He got desperate. Tried calling a girl she once worked with. Offered her cash if she had info. "Do you know where she went?" he asked. "Why? So you can break her again." The girl hung up. Cameron called Camille's mother. No answer. Left a voicemail. "I know I messed up. I need to talk to her. Please." No call back. He sent a few texts to Camille, knowing she wouldn't see them. Still, he wrote them. "I wasn't ready. That's not an excuse. Just truth. I didn't mean to hurt you." I just didn't know how to be a husband. Tell me what hospital. Please, I need to know. Even if I never see you again, I want to know if our baby's okay. No reply. Ever. His nights grew longer. He'd fall asleep with the phone in his hand. Wake up hoping to see 3 dots. A typing bubble. Anything. But it never came. He began walking into rooms and forgetting why he was there. Staring into open refrigerators without taking anything. Driving without knowing the destination. Camille wasn't just gone. She had disappeared like she'd never existed. Then one day he heard a rumor. A guy at the gym mentioned Camille's sister. Didn't she have family out west? Some tough chick. Cameron blinked. Where out west? I dunno. Bro, Colorado maybe? That was enough. He opened a map app. Zoomed in on Colorado Springs. Too many streets. Too many homes. But he had nowhere else to look. He packed a bag. Called off work indefinitely. And drove. The coffee shop sat on the corner of a quiet street in Boulder, Colorado. It had a red awning, chipped slightly at the edge, and a tiny chalkboard that read strong coffee. Soft landings. Cameron didn't know why he walked in. He just needed somewhere to breathe. He'd been in Colorado less than 24 hours. No plan, no leads, just a shallow hope and a tired heart. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes, bloodshot. He ordered a black coffee. No sugar. Sat by the window. And that's when he saw her. Across the street. Hair pulled up in a soft bun. A long cream sweater over a green maternity dress. She was laughing, at something a woman beside her had said. She looked different. Heavier, yes, but radiant. Fuller in her face. Brighter in her skin. Softer in her posture. But what froze him wasn't the sound of her laugh or the way she cradled her belly absent-mindedly. It was the belly itself. Rounded. Alive. Cameron stood so quickly his chair screeched against the floor. The barista looked over, startled. He couldn't hear. Couldn't speak. The world narrowed until there was only one frame. Camille, holding her stomach, standing under a Colorado sun. She hadn't gotten the abortion. His legs carried him backward, out the door. Not toward her, but away. He stumbled to his car, chest rising like he'd just run a mile uphill. He fumbled for the handle, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there frozen. His coffee still steamed in his hand. He placed it on the dashboard and stared at his trembling fingers. Inside the car, everything was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of passing traffic and the dull throb in his ears. He gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Tighter, then released. He rested his head on the wheel, eyes wide, breathing shaky. She was still pregnant. She had carried the child he told her to erase. She had chosen life without him. Chosen safety. Chosen peace. Without yelling. Without punishing him. She had just left. His mind raced. He thought of the night he told her to fix it. The way she didn't fight, didn't scream, just nodded. He thought that meant it was handled. He thought that meant she agreed. But now, sitting in this unfamiliar city, watching the woman he once called home carry his unborn child, Cameron realized the truth. She hadn't taken something from him. She had protected something from him. He sat in the car for almost an hour. People came and went from the coffee shop. Cars honked. A dog barked. But he just sat there, shaken. Not from guilt alone, but from the weight of what he had almost lost completely. He had told her he wasn't ready. Now he wasn't even sure he was worthy. He watched as Camille and the other woman, Harriet he assumed, walked into a nearby bookstore. He didn't follow. He didn't speak. He just pulled his hoodie up, started the car, and drove to a cheap motel off the highway. That night he didn't sleep. He just laid on a thin mattress in a dim room, one hand over his eyes, the other over his heart. And for the first time in his adult life, he cried. Cameron bought a notebook from a corner store near the motel. It was small, spiral-bound, and had a plain blue cover. No fancy leather, no gold trim, just paper and pen. He didn't know where else to begin. He couldn't show up at the door. He couldn't call, his number was still blocked. So he wrote, Letter number 1. Camille, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know I saw you yesterday. You were smiling, holding your belly. I don't deserve that image, but I'll never forget it. I was wrong. I was selfish. I told you to erase something I helped create, and you didn't. Thank you for not listening to me. See. He folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it to her first name only. Then he walked to the flower shop where she worked. He'd followed discreetly once, from a distance, and left the envelope in the mailbox around the back. No knock, no note to the clerk, just silence. He kept writing, every night after work. He'd taken a job nearby, construction cleanup, hard labor, long hours, enough to keep his hands busy and his head from spinning. But at night the letters came. Letter number 2. I don't want to come back into your life with promises. I just want to be near enough to serve. Let me sweep the porch. Let me carry the groceries. Let me earn what I threw away. Cameron. Letter number 3. If you never speak to me again, I will understand. But if I can see the child once, just once, I'll consider that grace. He left letters at the mailbox, some at the doorstep in the early morning before anyone stirred. One time, he slipped a folded note through the crack of the florist's back door. He wasn't trying to push. He was trying to repent. And then came the flowers. Not store-bought bouquets, but wild arrangements he learned to tie himself. Daisies for new beginnings. Lavender for calm. One small pot of rosemary, with a note taped underneath. For remembrance of who I once was, and who I never want to be again. Harriet intercepted most of it. She found the envelopes, the pots, the letters left by the door. She tore them up, burned some in the sink, tossed others in the trash. He doesn't get to cry now, she said one evening, her voice low. He forfeited his place. Camille never disagreed out loud, but sometimes when Harriet stepped out, she retrieved them. In her room, behind a drawer lined with old sweaters, Camille kept a shoebox. Inside, every letter, every note, even the torn ones taped back together. She never replied, but she read them, and some nights, when the weight of carrying a child alone pressed into her spine, she would open the box and weep, not because she forgave him, not because she missed him, but because part of her still remembered the man from Miami. The man who once kissed her neck on a balcony and whispered, "You're my forever peace." Now that man was writing letters at midnight, and she didn't know if she wanted him back. But she knew he was trying. Cameron didn't knock. Not once. But every morning, before the sun finished rising, he came. He'd sweep the front porch quietly. He'd dust the mailbox. He'd shovel the walkway when it snowed. And by the time Harriet stirred inside, he was already gone. The first time Harriet saw him out the window, she nearly ripped the curtain down. She stormed out onto the porch in slippers and a robe, rage boiling just under the surface. What part of stay away didn't you understand? Cameron didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood up from where he had been scrubbing mud from the front steps. I'm not here to talk. I'm not here to beg. I'm here to work. This isn't a service project. This is my house. I know. He picked up his bucket and walked away. Didn't say another word. The next day he was back. Early again. No letter this time. Just a cooler by the front door. Inside, a home-cooked meal. Still warm. Grilled chicken, rice, sautéed vegetables. All labeled. No note. Just a small sticker on the lid that read, "For Camille. Eat while it's hot." Harriet saw it first. Almost kicked the cooler over. But when Camille came to the door and looked down, she paused. "He's cooking now?" she asked softly. "He's trying to worm his way in. Don't fall for it." Camille didn't reply. She just lifted the lid. And for the first time in weeks, the smell of warm seasoning made her hungry. Days passed. Cameron didn't speak. He didn't wait around. But he kept coming. Mornings. Porch swept. Afternoons. Trash bins rolled back from the curb. Evenings. A meal, neatly packed, always sealed, never touched. At the flower shop, Camille found herself wondering, how is he learning to cook like that? Who taught him to fold napkins like this? Why does he know my cravings better than I do? Harriet didn't trust any of it. People change when they want something. Camille looked out the window. Cameron had just left again, his shadow shrinking into the street. Sometimes people change because they lost something. One day, Camille caught him. She had woken up earlier than usual. Back pain from the pregnancy. Couldn't sleep. She stepped outside just before dawn. And there he was, crouched by her car, brushing off fresh snow from the windshield with a towel. Their eyes met. He froze. She didn't speak, just wrapped her sweater tighter and stood there. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said quietly. She nodded. He reached for the wiper blades, lifted them gently, then stepped back. "I'll go." He turned to walk away. But before he disappeared down the street, she said, "You can leave the meals at the side door from now on. The front's too visible." He turned back, unsure if he heard her right. Camille met his gaze. No smile, no forgiveness, just a simple instruction. He nodded once, then left. That night he didn't write a letter. He just lay in his trailer, staring at the ceiling, one arm over his forehead, and for the first time since she left, he allowed himself to hope, not for love, not for redemption, but for a chance to do something right. The wind howled harder than usual that morning. Snow had started to fall overnight, light at first, now gathering into steady layers along the sidewalks. Harriet had gone to the grocery store. Camille stayed home, moving slower these days. Her back ached. Her ankles were swollen. Every step took effort. She was 37 weeks along. She had just finished folding a small stack of baby onesies when the pain hit. Sharp, sudden, lower back, then her abdomen, tightening like a belt being pulled from the inside. Camille gasped, grabbing the back of the couch for balance. Another wave followed only minutes later. She checked the time. 6 minutes apart. Her heart raced not from fear, but from knowing this was it. She reached for her phone on the end table, but before she could dial Harriet, another contraction knocked the breath out of her. She dropped the phone to the floor. Outside, Cameron was clearing the sidewalk. He'd started every morning that week doing small chores, just enough to be useful, not enough to be intrusive. He looked up toward the front window. Something didn't feel right. The curtains hadn't moved. Usually, he caught a glimpse of Camille pacing or sipping tea. Not today. Then the front door flew open. "Harriet." "Cameron." He dropped the shovel. "It's Camille. The baby's coming." He didn't think. He didn't speak. He just ran. They got her into the back seat of Harriet's car. But the engine sputtered. Nothing. Battery dead. The cold had drained it. "Are you kidding me?" Harriet shouted, slamming her hand against the steering wheel. Camille groaned in the back seat, gripping the edge of the door, eyes squeezed shut. "We can't wait," Harriet snapped. "She's in full labor." Cameron didn't hesitate. "Get in my truck." Camille could barely focus, the contractions blurring everything. All she remembered was the rush of cold air, Harriet holding her hand, and Cameron's voice, urgent but steady. "Just breathe, Camille. We're almost there." The drive was fast. He ran red lights, took turns tight, didn't care. Harriet called the hospital from the passenger seat, alerting them that they were minutes away. Camille screamed once, a sharp, guttural cry that made Cameron grip the wheel tighter. "Stay with me," he said through gritted teeth. He didn't look back. He just drove. They pulled into the emergency lane. Nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Harriet jumped out first. Cameron opened the truck door and lifted Camille himself, holding her steady until she was seated. "You can't come in," one nurse said, blocking Cameron. "I'm the father," he began. "She has to approve it." Cameron turned to Camille, breath caught in his chest. She looked at him. Sweat lined her forehead. Her face was pale, but her eyes clear. She didn't speak. She just nodded once. The nurse stepped aside, and Cameron followed. Inside the hospital, the world turned into beeping monitors, sterile walls, and nurses moving with practiced urgency. They rushed Camille into labor and delivery. Harriet helped her change into a gown, held her hand as they prepped the four. Cameron stood just outside the curtain, his hands shaking slightly. He didn't dare step further. But he didn't leave. One nurse came out. "She's progressing fast. It's going to happen soon." Cameron nodded, then sat down in the hallway, alone. For the next 2 hours he sat in silence, watching nurses come and go. He didn't call anyone, didn't check his phone, didn't breathe too loud. He just waited. Then finally he heard it. Not one cry, two. One louder, one softer. A harmony. New life, double the grace. Cameron stood, his legs stiff, his throat dry. A nurse appeared. "You can come in now." He walked in slowly, unsure of what he'd find. And there she was, Camille, exhausted, leaning back against the pillows, hair damp with sweat. In her arms, 2 swaddled newborns. One in pink, one in blue. She looked up at him, didn't smile, didn't speak, just held the babies closer. Cameron didn't ask to hold them, didn't reach. He just knelt beside her bed, head bowed low, and whispered, "Thank you for saving them from me." Cameron didn't ask questions. He just sat quietly at Camille's bedside, watching the rise and fall of her chest as she drifted in and out of sleep. Her arms cradled 2 lives he'd nearly erased. A nurse gently reached for one of the babies to check vitals. Camille stirred but didn't resist. Her grip was light, maternal. The kind that comes from instinct, not instruction. Cameron stood up. "Can I?" he asked softly, nodding toward the baby in pink. Camille looked at him. No expression, no answer, just a long, unreadable pause. Then, a single word. "Wash your hands." Cameron moved fast, scrubbed every finger, dried his palms with care. He returned to the room, hands clean, arms nervous. The nurse placed the baby into his hold, adjusting his arms gently. It was awkward at first, his grip stiff, but then, her eyelids fluttered open, tiny, barely focused, yet there. And suddenly, Cameron's world narrowed into something small and holy. He sat down in the corner chair, baby cradled in his arms. The soft warmth of her against his chest was unlike anything he'd felt. His jaw clenched as emotion swelled in his throat. "She's tiny," he whispered. Camille, still watching him, nodded faintly. "Her name's Wren." Cameron looked up. "Wren?" "Yeah." He let the name settle. Simple, soft, perfect. A moment later, the nurse handed him the second baby. The boy. This one had a stronger cry, louder, feistier. Camille smirked faintly from her bed. "That's Wyatt." "Wren and Wyatt," Cameron echoed. They didn't match, but somehow they belonged. He held both, one after the other, counted fingers, watched their chests rise and fall, listened to the soft squeaks and fusses that came in spurts. They didn't cry much, just breathed, as if they, too, were assessing him. Camille shifted, sitting up a bit straighter. "I didn't name them after you. I didn't even plan the names." "I know, but I picked them the day I left." Cameron looked up again, swallowing hard. "You left? And still planned names?" "Of course I did. I wasn't carrying a mistake. I was carrying meaning." He nodded. No defense, no excuse, only silence. Later that evening, Harriet arrived. She peeked in with her coat still on, eyes alert. When she saw Cameron sitting in the corner, calm, quiet, cradling Wren, she stiffened. "You good?" she asked Camille. Camille nodded. "They're healthy, strong." Harriet stepped in, hovered near the bed, then turned to Cameron. "You try anything stupid, I'll have you escorted out, blood or not." "I know," he replied. "I'm not here to play dad. I'm here to show up." Harriet narrowed her eyes, studied him, then finally said, "Keep holding her like that. She looks warm." That night, Camille breastfed while Cameron stood at the window, rocking Wyatt gently. The hospital lights buzzed faintly. Camille didn't say much, neither did he. But something about the silence between them felt different this time. Not heavy, not distant, just possible. At one point, Wren began fussing. Cameron instinctively reached over, adjusted the blanket around her feet. She settled. Camille noticed. You're learning. I'm trying. Trying isn't parenting. He nodded. Then I'll try harder. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, they sleep in shifts. It'll drain you. All of it. Then let me be tired with you. A flicker in her eyes. Pain. Memory. Maybe even something softer. But it passed. She laid back. They don't need promises. They need peace. I won't offer promises, he replied. Just presence. Cameron didn't ask to stay the night. But he didn't leave either. The nurses found a chair. Brought a blanket. He curled up in the corner, arms crossed over his chest, eyes locked on two bassinets. And for the first time in years, he didn't need a reason to stay. He just stayed. Cameron never asked to move in. He just started showing up every morning. First with diapers, then with formula, then with help. Always early, always quiet, never expecting entry, just waiting on the porch. Sometimes Harriet would open the door and pass him a bag of trash. Other times, Camille would nod toward the twin stroller and say, "They need sun. You can take them for 15 minutes. That was all he got. And he took it. Every single time. The first time he changed a diaper, Wyatt screamed so loud he nearly abandoned ship. Camille didn't laugh. She just handed him a new wipe and said, "Back to front. Not the other way." By the third week, he was a pro. He had a routine. Wren first, then Wyatt. And always sang to them in a soft, cracked voice while he worked. Old Motown, bits of jazz, whatever he remembered from his childhood. The babies liked it. Sometimes they even smiled. Camille watched all of it from the hallway. Not warmly, not bitterly, just watched, like she was measuring. Every bottle he washed, every onesie he folded. Every time he whispered, "You're safe now," to the twins when they stirred in their sleep. She was taking notes, and he knew it. Harriet still kept her guard up. "One wrong move, and I'm changing the locks," she'd tell him. "I expect you to." He never rolled his eyes, never asked for Camille to talk to him alone, never touched her hand, never stepped inside unless invited. His redemption was not in speeches. It was in sweat, in patience, in the silence he used to weaponize, now turned into service. One rainy evening, Camille came home from a postpartum checkup. She walked into the living room and froze. Cameron was on the floor, fast asleep. One twin on each side of his chest, curled in peacefully. His arms were outstretched, fingers twitching in sleep. His shirt was stained with spit up, his hair a mess, but his face, calm, like the war inside him had paused, if only for a few hours. She didn't wake him. She sat on the arm of the couch and watched. Something in her chest ached, but it wasn't pain. It was the memory of the man she had prayed he might one day be. And now, he was starting to look like him. Harriet walked in a few minutes later, took one look at the scene, exhaled. "Well, damn." Camille nodded. "He's showing up." "Yeah," Harriet muttered. "But the real question is, for how long?" Camille didn't answer, because for once, she wasn't thinking about how long. She was just watching what was real. The next morning, she left a note on the counter. "You can stay until the twins start sleeping through the night. Guest room only. And no decisions made before then." Cameron read it twice, then wrote one word beneath it. Understood. The twins were teething, which meant no one in the house had slept in 3 days. Cameron took the night shift again. No argument, no expectation. Just a nod and a warm bottle in each hand as Camille passed him the babies and shuffled back to bed with barely a word. But instead of collapsing into sleep, Camille lingered by the doorway. Something made her pause. She watched from the shadows. Cameron sat cross-legged on the living room floor. He rocked Wren gently with one arm while bouncing Wyatt on his knee. A lullaby played low on a phone speaker, something acoustic, soft. His eyes were tired, his body slouched with exhaustion, but his face was at peace. He whispered to them, not knowing Camille was listening. "You're safe. You're strong. And I'm not going anywhere. Ren whimpered. He rocked her closer to his chest. I know, baby girl. I used to be lost too. But then I saw your mama smile. And I found my way. Camille's breath caught. Wyatt let out a squeaky half-cry. Cameron gently stood, walking a slow circle in the room with both babies pressed against his chest. He didn't complain, didn't flinch. He was humming now. Not words, just a soft tune on his breath. It wasn't pretty, but it was full of presence. Camille leaned her head against the doorframe, closed her eyes, and listened. A few hours later, she woke with a start. Habit had conditioned her for interruptions. But the house was silent. She stepped into the hallway, padded toward the living room, and saw it. Cameron on the rug, asleep, one baby across his chest, the other nestled in the crook of his arm. The bottle caps were closed, the burp cloths used and folded. Ren whimpered. He rocked her closer to his chest. I know, baby girl. I used to be lost too. But then I saw your mama smile. And I found my way. Camille's breath caught. Wyatt let out a squeaky half-cry. Cameron gently stood, walking a slow circle in the room with both babies pressed against his chest. He didn't complain, didn't flinch. He was humming now. Not words, just a soft tune on his breath. It wasn't pretty, but it was full of presence. Camille leaned her head against the doorframe, closed her eyes, and listened. A few hours later, she woke with a start. Habit had conditioned her for interruptions. But the house was silent. She stepped into the hallway, padded toward the living room, and saw it. Cameron on the rug, asleep, one baby across his chest, the other nestled in the crook of his arm. The bottle caps were closed, the burp cloths used and folded. The room smelled like baby lotion and lavender. And her heart, it didn't break. It thawed. She walked over quietly, grabbed the knitted throw from the couch and laid it gently over the three of them. She lingered, watched the tiny rise and fall of the babies' bellies against their father's chest, watched the way Cameron's arms curled around them, even in sleep. And she whispered, not for him, but maybe for herself, they're the best part of me. Cameron stirred but didn't open his eyes. In a sleepy voice, he mumbled, and you're the only good I ever knew. Then his body went still again, back into sleep. Camille stood there in silence, not because she was unsure, but because, for the first time in a long time, she felt something that didn't hurt. She walked back to her room, curled up under the covers, and let herself feel safe. Not because she trusted him completely, but because she no longer feared him. In the morning, she didn't mention the night. Neither did he. But when she handed him a mug of coffee before he left to take out the trash, she added sugar. He liked it that way, and she remembered. The backyard wasn't much. Patch of grass, a few wilting flower beds, a crooked fence leaning slightly on the south end. But to Cameron it was everything. He spent the entire week building it, his first real project in the new chapter of his life. A sandbox, handcrafted from cedar, corners rounded smooth, no nails sticking out. He sanded it twice, painted it once. Inside he poured soft, filtered sand. The good kind, cool to the touch, clean between fingers. 2 bright red plastic buckets. For toy shovels. A small rake. He placed a pinwheel at the edge. Just for color. It was simple, but it was the most deliberate thing he'd built with his hands in years. Camille watched from the kitchen window as he patted the last corner. The twins, now 10 months, were cooing in their high chairs, chewing on banana slices and smearing applesauce across their trays. She wiped Wyatt's chin, then looked back out the window. He was testing the sturdiness of the sandbox edge with his weight. It didn't budge. Later that afternoon, he brought them outside, one at a time. He placed Wyatt gently into the sand, guided his tiny hands to the shovel, then stepped back. Camille followed behind with Ren in her arms. Ren shrieked at the touch of the sand, then burst into giggles. Camille smiled. Looks like you did something right. Finally, Cameron replied. He sat in the grass, just close enough to supervise, just far enough not to intrude. Camille sat beside him, They watched as the twins dug clumsily and threw handfuls of sand into the air. "They look free," she said softly. "They are." A beat passed. "Are you?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his hoodie pocket. A small box, worn on the corners. He turned it in his hand before opening it. Inside, a simple silver ring. No diamonds, no glitter, no grandiosity, just intentional metal smoothed by care. He didn't get on one knee. He didn't offer a speech. He simply held the box out, resting it gently on the grass between them. "I don't want the old version of us. I don't even want forgiveness if you're not ready to give it." "Then what do you want?" "A chance to be yours again. This time with presence. With patience. With everything I should have offered the first time." "Cameron, if you say no, I'll stay anyway. As their father. As your helper. As the man who finally learned how to love quietly." The wind stirred the pinwheel. The twins squealed as they slapped the sand. Camille looked at them, then at him. "You built a sandbox." "I did. You didn't ask for applause. Didn't need it. And you haven't raised your voice in almost a year. Didn't want to." She reached forward, closed the box, took it gently from his hand. "Don't put it on me yet." "Okay. But keep it nearby." Cameron smiled, nodded once, then leaned back on his palms, watching the twins with calm eyes. And Camille? She leaned just slightly toward him. Not all the way, but enough. A year passed. The sandbox now had a permanent spot beneath the old oak tree. The twins, Ren and Wyatt, were walking, talking, tumbling over each other in fits of laughter. Cameron had added a small bench beside the sandbox, painted it soft blue. Camille sat there often now, sipping tea while watching the world she never imagined. Quiet, safe, complete. That morning, Camille stepped outside with 2 sippy cups and a folded blanket. She spread it near the sandbox and sat down, her toes brushing through the grass. Cameron was on the other side helping Wyatt dig a hole. Ren was collecting pebbles and arranging them in a crooked heart. Camille watched them, all three, and felt something click in her chest. Not a surge, not fireworks, just clarity. "Cameron," she said quietly. He looked up, brushing sand off his hands. "Yeah." She stood, walked toward him slowly, and reached into her sweater pocket, pulled out the small box he had given her months ago. "You still mean it?" she asked. He stood up, brushing his palms on his jeans. "Every word. No speech. No promises. Just presence. No declarations. Just devotion." She opened the box, looked at the ring, then looked at him. "I'm not the same woman you married. And I'm not the man who hurt her." A pause. The wind stirred the leaves above them. The twins squealed behind her. And Camille, steady now, said, "Then maybe we can build something new." She held out her hand. Cameron didn't rush. He took the ring slowly, slid it onto her finger like it was the most fragile thing in the world. Fit perfectly, this time not as a symbol of ownership, but of intention, of return. The twins clapped, unaware. Camille laughed. So did he. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. This time she didn't pull away. They sat on the bench together while the sun dipped behind the rooftops. Ren handed Cameron a handful of sand and said, "Daddy, make cake." He smiled, took the sand, and said, "Only if Mommy helps." Camille grinned. "You better get 2 pretend candles." The camera would have captured them like a memory. A bench, a sandbox, 2 children laughing, 2 adults healing, and a new ring that didn't promise forever. It simply promised now. Thank you, family, for staying with us to the very end. If the story touched you, if it reminded you that healing takes time but love can still win, comment below. I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. This family is global, and your voice matters. And if you're new here, welcome home. Subscribe now because here we don't just tell stories. We remember what matters. We restore dignity. We believe love still heals. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong.